Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. We've got a really distinguished guest today. He uniquely combines 10 years in the Italian creative industry, 10 years in corporate management, and 10 plus years as an independent consultant and academic researcher. He's notably working in the space of design futures and has a PhD from Tilburg. Let's welcome Dr. Marco Bevolo. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. I'm really delighted to be on Unique Ways with you, with Thomas Girard. And thank you for the introduction. I spent 10 years in the Italian creative industry because I'm Italian, and I grew up in Torino, Turin, and Milan. And I have seen a little bit the whole landscape of creative industries, from fine arts to automotive design to advertising.
Great.
So I think that's a bit my foundation. If you want
Cool.
To give it a starting point.
Okay, great. If you don't mind, we can just jump into the 20 questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So number one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Well, I think what I do is to always have a difficulty with definitions and to be boxed into a specific role. I'm a generalist, meaning that I work on different aspects of social life and business that go from leisure to community development to all sorts of topics that are related to design and design futures. Perhaps the best way to define myself is to say that at academic level, I'm a pracademic, meaning that I am a bridge between practice and academic scientific research. I earned my PhD when I was at the end of my 40s. Therefore, I came into academia with 20 years of business experience on my back, and that's why I play this bridging function. And in business consulting, I'm an explorer on the fuzzy front. This means that normally you, as a business, call me when there are pockets of value hidden or not so hidden in your portfolio, and you need to formalize, you need to structure, you need to define these opportunities of value creation in order to connect them to your business model, to your investors, to your markets. So academic explorer would be the way to describe myself at best. You mentioned design futures. I hold an appointment at the World University of Design in India as adjunct professor in design futures. We will talk about it during the podcast, but that's very much speaking of my roots, which is creative industry and design, and of my interest that is historically for the last 25 years has been future design and future research.
That's awesome. That's a great intro. You know, I found you, Marco, through some work you were doing with Canadian designer Bruce Mao, which I hope we can go into at some point. But let's go to number two. So what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Well, as I mentioned, I am a generalist and I am a practice-driven academic. So bridging the different knowledge areas is a bit my specialty. From an epistemological point of view, I'm a constructivist. So I do believe in the co-creation and co-design of solutions and of scientific insights. And I have a very strong relational orientation, which means I don't sell a process. I do not provide a standard package to my clients or even to my students whom I mentor. I always work on the person. I come from psychoanalysis as an intellectual interest during my formative years. And therefore, I use a lot of the psychoanalytic method, and I use a lot of the psychoanalytic ways to look at the world and at people in order to base my contribution. So I would say that what makes me different is my roots in humanities, my multidisciplinary overview of things, and my ability to build bridges across different disciplines, different words, different domains. So at Philips, at Philips Design, I connected the socio-cultural trends and sociology to brand marketing. In recent consulting projects, I connected community development from a social point of view to real estate and investor audiences. I actually published a book around 15 years ago that was looking at inspiration and cross-fertilization among different fields, fine arts, culture, design, and the business context. So that's a little bit my peculiarity.
That's great. We'll definitely drop the book in the show notes so that our audience can grab that. That sounds like a fantastic one. Number 3, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
It's a peculiar question for me, because in a way I always built my trajectory outside of the conventional track, meaning that I did high school at technical institute where I studied electronics design and engineering. Then I did my first cycle of university studies at humanities, literature and philosophy. Then I went into behavioral and social sciences. In the meantime, I worked in the construction of the trend research practice at Philips Design. And especially at that time, trend research was not formalized as it is now in schools, institutes. You have all sorts of experts who teach you how to do trend research. But in 1999, when I started my decade at Philips Design, there was very little. I remember in my employment in the fine arts publishing, there was the opportunity to interview Faith Popcorn and Karl Rode, who were working already in trend research for lifestyle and fashion companies, and they were really very, very unique on the horizon of the study of culture, the study of the future. So the reason why is I have always pursued directions that seemed attractive, unique, and on this fuzzy front that I described before. So the area where things already exist, but they are not formalized, they are not defined, they are not structured. That is my area of interest. And why that? To be honest, I think it has to do with the personal history, the character, the education, it really has to do with your existential, or in this case, my existential background.
So we're talking a bit about design futures today, but number 4 is a bit different than that. It says, what does your future look like?
Well, I mentioned this convergence of different and distant disciplines. I would like to refer to the latest book by Bruce Mau with Julio Mario Ottino called The Nexus. And it's a book that explores the convergence among fine arts, design, and science through design, through the eyes of design. It's a book, it's been published a few weeks ago on MIT Press, with MIT Press. And it's a book that brings back the Renaissance spirit from Italy, even explicitly. I think I see my future in this domain of multidisciplinary practice, of multicultural thinking, and of exploration of the potential connections and the conversion of opportunities into real value.
I get super wide-eyed when you talk about Bruce Mau. You know, during my formative years, Lifestyles and Massive Change came out, and they were really impactful for me. So I'm super excited for this new book.
Yeah, well, actually, we had Bruce Mau twice on a LinkedIn series that I'm doing with Filiberto Amati of Amati and Associates, who is my partner in crime. We are doing conversations that are basically quite enjoyable, we hope, as a kind of a show on LinkedIn, but we also use the transcripts and all the information as background and as foundation to write white papers, peer-reviewed papers, and other forms of publications. And Bruce was kind enough to be on this series last year about the future of events. And very recently, he was interviewed with Julio Mario Ottino about the Nexus, about his new book. We also had Busy Williams, who is his partner and business associate, separately to speak about the future of their practice. But you know that there is a nice anecdote about Bruce, because actually I met him the first time in 2006 in Toronto. I was there for a conference of the World Future Society, and I just visited his studio at the time. Now he's in Chicago, of course. But actually, we met in 1995 because he was in Milan working on his project for Flash Art, a redesign, restyle project for the graphic design of the magazine Flash Art International. I was an editor-in-chief in the same publishing house for a national magazine, an Italian national magazine. We worked actually for a few weeks in the same office, but we never met because I was working during regular business hours and he was working at night. He stayed, I think he stayed probably a month or a couple of months in Milan, but he never changed the time zone. And basically, he was working at night when the office was empty. So we knew he was there, but we didn't meet in person. It's always a nice anecdote because Bruce has been really foundational in in his work. I remember his book with Rem Koolhaas at the time at Flash Art Publishers was on the shelf of every graphic designer. It was really used as a kind of a reference Bible. I followed his work later on. When I visited him, he was already working much broader than graphic design, which he masters absolutely. And then now I think his work is really philosophically and intellectually probably the best visionary inspiration that you have in the creative industry in design.
Fantastic. I'm excited for this next question because you've mentioned a lot of places already. So number 5 is let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Well, technically speaking, I work a lot on place branding, place making, because it's part of my research interests. I'm also on the editorial board of Place Branding and Public Policy, which is a journal edited by Robert Govers with Palgrave in the UK. And Robert Govers is a very good friend. We have a lot of intellectual exchange. There are 3 places that play a big role in my life. One is the Netherlands, where I live. It's a country, in a way, I chose to live in the 1990s because of the welfare, of the social systems, of the can-do mentality, combined with the tradition of care. I have to say that the country evolved much more towards hardcore liberalism, so hardcore capitalism, and things went a little different than I expected. But I've been living in the Netherlands for nearly 25 years, and I know the culture, I know the mentality, I know the people. And the country, the landscape is also very particular because it's all flat. So when Dutch people drive in the mountains, they often break the gearbox of their cars because they are not used to drive with a steep road. So it's a kind of window on the world, and it really influenced me in terms of looking things in a different way. Of course, I was born in Turin and raised in Turin and Milan. I have to say that I became Italian living abroad. When I was in Italy, I was much more internationally oriented. Now I have a much better understanding than I used to have about Italy, the landscape, the culture, the language, which is really important. I'm very much connected to Japan because I live for 25 years. Now I have lived for the last 25 years with a Japanese spouse, and I visited until Corona yearly. I was in Japan visiting the family, visiting the places. Funny enough, I think Japan and Italy are much closer than Italy and the Netherlands as mentality, as culture, as values. Then there are 2 countries that I really like. One is Singapore, because of the climate, because of the efficiency, because of the let's say because of the character of people there. I always enjoyed. And the other one is Canada. I think Canada, I have visited a few times. The last time I was a visiting scholar at Vancouver Island University. I think Canada has done some exceptional things with the whole reconciliation process with the First Nations.
Mm.
I have been exposed, I have been engaging in a dialogue with several First Nation senior leaders on campus, business leaders in Vancouver. I was very, very impressed. And I always loved the Canadian mindset. I remember an old advertising from, I think it was a beer that said, Canada, the best country in North America. So that is definitely a nation that I look upon with a great interest.
Great. 6, if you had to start from scratch, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Well, it's a bit of a difficult question because there are two opposite advices that I could give. The first would be to be more open to compromises, and the second would be to be more radical. So I feel that on the one hand, you need to be, especially in your formative years, you need to be less judgmental and more open to understanding. So what I learned traveling a lot, I did a lot of work in conference work in Asia, in North America, a bit South America. It's not really good to be judgmental. You have the risk to think a bit like to sound like Rem Koolhaas, who is very relativist. The way he speaks about Middle East or about in the past about Singapore. But at the same time, you need to put things in context. You need to understand culture. You need to understand the place. You need to understand the historical moment before you formulate an opinion. Going to see the world with the glasses of let's say our Western education and our Western beliefs and our Western cosmogony, I think it's really not ideal. We had a long discussion with Bruce Mao last year about the need to take on board the cosmogonies of new cosmogonies of ancient cultures. To learn again, to look at the world with different eyes. The other advice is totally opposite. I would say be more radical in pursuing what you believe is really relevant. A big regret I have is that I stopped with journalism when after my experience at Flash Art International. I continued to write. I emigrated to the Netherlands working in English. I thought I'm giving up my writing talent or my writing interests. Instead, I started writing in English. I always had the feeling that I might have pursued more radically my interest in journalism or certain directions in my formative years that I sort of phased out. So on the one hand, be less judgmental and be more open to differences, and on the other hand, be more radical and be more even stubborn in pursuing your core interests.
Perfect. 7, can you describe a day in your life?
Messy, It's basically organizing mess. I have lists of things to do with priority bullet points, and from managing the healthcare insurance in the Netherlands to taking care of family matters in Italy, to keeping in touch and keeping in contact with business associates. It's always very messy, very dynamic. So I don't have a day in my life as a typical day in my life, not even the weekends. I tend to use a lot of my leisure time as research time or writing time. So very active and very how can I say, structured chaos, I would define it.
Nice. 8. So you've kind of dropped hints at this with the bits and pieces, but I'm interested to see how it might fuse together. So lifelong learning is a popular topic these days. How do you stay up to date?
Well, it's peculiar. It's a peculiar topic for me because I buy a huge amount of books of all sorts. I don't have much reading time, but when I want to go deeper into a topic, I normally have 5 books already, and I know where they are, and I have a direction where to go. I follow the news. I have a very good generalist reference for the news, which is the Italian economic radio. It's called Radio 24, Radio 24, and it actually belongs to the Industrial Association of Italy, but it's very well structured. So that's very good because when I go to the gym, I can listen to podcasts by anchors of this radio. I do not watch TV. I go sometimes to the movies. I try to be honest, I also try to make reference to the classics. So if I have the choice of reading a trend report by a trend agency on what's going on in an industry, or read a novel by Ernest Hemingway, I will definitely read Hemingway. So I believe that in the classics, in the authors that really, if you read Shakespeare, if you read Hemingway, if you read Dante Alighieri, you can find a much better food for thoughts and lifelong learning inspiration than by actually reading a report by a business consulting agency. So I really try to go back to the source of what matters.
Marco and I were doing some prep before this, and he very quickly caught on that I have a liberal studies and design background kind of mushed together, which was...
Yeah, because you use the classic rhetorical structure, inventio, ordo, elocutio, actio, which is Latin. Yeah, that's I think that's important because the problem, the problem is not but the limit of the current media landscape is that even with TV as mass media, and I used to work in advertising, writing commercials for TV, but there was when you were writing commercials for mass media, you always had the reference of cinema, and in the reference of cinema, you had the reference of the kind of storytelling structures and the kind of aesthetics going back a few decades. So there was a sort of, even if it was very commercial, there was a sort of texture and depth in the discussions, in the flow of ideas. With social media, I see that there is a lot of behavioralist, mechanic way of just delivering a piece of content, and these additional fascination with great literature, great thinkers, masters of cinema or experimental cinema, whatever, but there is a way less multidisciplinary reference and more niche and in a way shallow way to generate content, manage content, analyze content. So what I understood from also from my students, nowadays copywriting is about finding the word, the most common word that the SEO will recognize and the algorithm will promote. And copywriting 25, 30 years ago was about finding the most original word that nobody would immediately know, so that you would create something new that would stick to the brand. It's totally an opposite job from a creative point of view.
That's great. 9 is about tools. Are you a digital person? Are you an analog person?
Very analog. I travel with. I have now to replace my MacBook 2013. That was my traveling tool, but I read on paper. I take notes on paper. I write. I think I write 10 Moleskine notebooks a year. I use ink. I prefer to use cartridge ink than to use solid ink. So I'm very, I know digital tools. I think they are necessary, but for myself, I'm a very analog person, and I became more and more analog. I became more and more digital in the practicalities, meaning the QR, the way we use the smartphone, but I became more and more analog in the way I collect and I analyze knowledge stuff.
I remember those 2013 MacBooks. That was a great machine.
Yeah. The only thing is the keyboard at a certain point it gives up.
Yeah, that's right. Number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance?
Very bad. So basically, the thing is that I develop a passion for the things I do, for the work I do. So I'm very, very focused. When I work in education, I'm very pastoral. So my students have access to me 24/7. If they are on a placement or whatever they need, they can reach me. This is, is not bad per se, but in terms of work-life balance, it's definitely 80% work, although a lot of things I do you cannot really call work because they are more related to networking, to socializing, to communication with other people. But definitely, and it's quite, I don't know if you saw the documentary Mao about Bruce's work, but at the end there is a part where he goes to a medical visit and he says a bit sadly, I designed strategies for everyone, but I didn't design a strategy for my work-life balance. So I think it's a bit well, to call it a destiny is too much. It's the habits of people who tend to burn passion into what they do, and that's the risk. And I always recommend the students to take their weekends off, take their holidays off. I always tell students, do as I say, don't do as I do.
Okay, just over halfway, number 11. If you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
A writer, definitely. So that's also how I looked upon myself for several years. It's how I describe myself in my website. So definitely a writer.
Great. 12, what would you not like to do in terms of career, in terms of life?
Well, I developed through the years a very sound hate for corporate politics. I really don't like the kind of dealing. I like politics as in, I don't know, Mr. Trudeau developing a policy. You know, I like politics in terms of political parties, ideas, and so on. But I do not like corporate politics or politics in academia, coffee machine politics. That's something I'm very, very vocal about. So that's what I would like not to have around me. That's what I'm really allergic to those mechanisms. I mean, that's how the world works. I'm not going to manage to change it myself alone, but at least I identified definitely my allergy.
Got it. 13, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I will take I will take up Bruce Mau again. He speaks about radical optimism. I am not an optimist person by character. I'm quite let's say reflexive, but I really love his notion of radical optimism because it goes back to the need and the will to improve and to work for a preferable future. And I also love his notion of life-centered design that he clarified in his book MC24, where he put down the 24 principles of design according to his vision. Life-centered design means designing for context, for the nature, for including everything. It's not human-centered design, and then you have a lot of garbage and a lot of problems. It's a design approach that looks at life holistically, including all creatures and all living beings. So radical optimism and life-centered design are definitely the things. And the last one is by Stefano Marzano, who used to be CEO of Philips Design. He put it in a book, I think in 1998, and the sentence is, design is an act of love. And it's also a political act, but I think an act of love is a perfect way to describe design.
Fascinating. Okay, number 14, what's your least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Well, it's not a specific word, quote, or sentence, but it's a linguistic approach that is neurolinguistic programming. I have been exposed to a couple of managers who were clearly trained in this kind of practice. I find it, to be honest, I find it miserable. Neurolinguistic programming means to always use the sentences that you think will be received by the audience in order to influence them to go the direction you want. Now, it's not a technical definition, but the result is basically a very mediocre linguistic practice, and I can detect it immediately if somebody is using neurolinguistic programming. I find it really, I find it really, to be honest, I find it quite miserable that when I talk to you, instead of focusing on you and trying to build a connection, I focus on my purpose and I try to influence you with little linguistic tricks that are very cliche. That's something that I'm really allergic to, the lack of originality, the lack of inspiration.
Got it. 15. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would you choose? Maverick.
I think I wrote a couple of articles about it, but definitely a maverick. Someone, yeah?
Yeah, perfect. 16.
Someone who does not fit, let's say, or deliberately challenges the structures. I remember Lance Armstrong in an old Nike documentary. He was training and one of his team went to him while he was on the bike, said, well, there are 3 meters of snow up the road, on the road, so we cannot go farther. We have to stop. And he just, without turning his head, he just said, "Who says so?" So I really love that spirit of challenging the status quo. So definitely Maverick.
I'm with you on that. 16. What keeps you up at night?
Well, the thing is that we spoke a lot about inspiration and motivation and very high level topics. But to be honest, if there is one thing that keeps me up at night is the practicalities. Mortgage, the price of gas, the price of food, rising inflation, climate change. I mean, the practical aspects are definitely coming in the way of life, and more so. To be very honest, life was much much simpler, much easier 30 years ago than now. And the context is really worrying at this time. The economic and the geopolitical context is really, I think globalization comes to an end and the world as we know it will have to change. So these practicalities are just the symptoms of a major change ahead. Yeah, and I hope it's a change for the best, but the signs are not really encouraging.
Yeah, this seems to be the sentiment right now, for sure. 17, what's a dream you're chasing?
Well, I can go back to the writer and to the dream of writing and publishing and let's say it would be really my I think in the mid 2000s I wrote a piece as part of a coaching program at my corporate employer. We had to write 1 page about how we would be describe yourself in 25 years. And I wrote a piece where I was independent. I was a writer, but a writer of essay, like, like Rifkin, Jeremy Rifkin, or this kind of authors who speak at conferences and so on. So definitely writing would be my interest for the next phase. I'm also, it's not finalized yet, but I'm in talks with Professor Bart Vernart of Fontes University of Applied Sciences in Eindhoven, to join him in his moral design strategy research group, and that's something I'm really interested about. So to work, that's a research group that works about the inclusivity and the ethics intrinsically expressed by technology, by algorithms, by the way applications are designed and so on. So that would be a direction I'm very interested to develop, to work on issues of great relevance.
Just a quick plug, we're talking about Canada a lot today. Check out the BC Review, formerly the Ormsby Review, really great articles there. Number 18 and the final stretch, what inspires you?
Well, I have always been inspired by exceptional people. That would be my reference. So we mentioned Bruce, his work with a massive change that is becoming massive action. It's definitely an inspiration. Stefano Marzano is coming back in intellectual terms with his work at La Sapienza on the dark side of design. I'm also very inspired by my students, some of them, of course, but I can mention Nelly Blaise, who is a student from St. Martin in the Caribbean. I supervised his final dissertation. We wrote an academic article together out of it. We presented it. It was about how to get teachers to become ambassadors for climate cause, for environmental protection. So it was about education and teaching and what really matters at this moment. And he's now working in an NGO in St. Martin. He had a corporate job that he left after a couple of years. He is also engaged in the international politics of St. Martin. He's very young, very balanced person, very focused, very powerful, very respectful. So an alumni like that, like Nelly Blaise, is definitely for me source of inspiration, as much as Stefano Marzano, Bruce Mau, who are by all standards gurus of design. So the young generation is also where I look upon a lot.
Wonderful. Number 19, what advice would you like to share?
Well, there is an old commencement speech by Steve Jobs. It's very famous. It's on YouTube, and he ends it up with a quote from a hippie magazine of the 1960s. Stay hungry, stay foolish. That would be definitely the advice that I like to give to everyone. Stay hungry, stay foolish is a way to stay young, is a way to stay open, and it's a way to be ready for your creative spark at any moment.
Well, that's great. Number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? How can we follow you? What should we do next?
Basically, I try to my public. I'm not on social media much. I stopped being on Facebook when the bridge in Italy came down in 2018, because we had 43 casualties from a major bridge collapse, and after 2 days, all Italians were arguing and fighting on Facebook. Half of Italy was accusing the other half of Italy, depending on political affiliation. And I really felt that social media are not part of the problem. They are to a large extent the problem in the worsening of the conditions of our social climate. I am on Instagram because my Indian university has asked me to deliver content on Instagram to their students, and I follow it. I also enjoy it sometimes. Primarily, I'm on LinkedIn and on Medium, and these are the two channels where I can be followed. I'm also very open to receiving interests, engaging in dialogues. So if normally people contact me, I always reply. This is a choice I made when I was in corporate management. I had a lot of people contacting me with the hope to get business or to get jobs, and I always replied to everyone, even if it was a student from a very far away country. But I always, if someone writes to me, I'm not going to leave the letter unreplied. So that's a way to reach me through LinkedIn. I think is the main channel, and in publications, also the academic publications. I do a lot, but that's more for the specialist audiences in leisure, in place branding, in place making, and in design futures.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Thank you so much, Marco. I mean, your insights are so great, but particularly today, your focus on Canada, not only talking about Bruce Mao, but bringing up Trudeau and your trip to Toronto, I think really makes it relatable for some of our audience, here in Vancouver or
Vancouver. As I visited it in 2019, both Vancouver Island and Vancouver, the city, I was hugely impressed. To be honest, if there was one place, well, of course I'm Italian, so I'm connected to Italy. My spouse is Japanese, so I'm connected to Japan. But if I have to, I'm not now trying to be, to be too nice. But if there was a country in the world where I would like to spend the last stretch of my professional career, that would be definitely Canada, Vancouver Island, Toronto. These are really places that I have greatly enjoyed, and where I observed things going in the right direction. Not everything will be perfect, but things are going in the right direction for sure.
Okay, well, that's, I love it here in Vancouver, so definitely on your side there. Thank you so much. It's been great today.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch and to continuing our dialogue in the future.
Okay, more soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.